Hello, everyone, and welcome to this panel on interoperability and the future of blockchain. I'm your host, Max, from the Columbia Blockchain Club and Arcade Node, and I have here with me today an all-star table of panelists. First, we have Derek, a CEO of Moonbeam, which is an Ethereum-compatible parachain on the Polkadot network. Ganesh, lead engineer at the Harmonic protocol, an EVM-compatible L1 blockchain with bridges to Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, and more. We also have Renee, who is the head of the NYU blockchain and partner at Harmonic, where she leads investments in blockchain infrastructure projects. Bringing some VC perspective to the table. Very happy to have you here, Renee. Next up, we have Scott, head of strategy at the Icon blockchain and one of the minds behind the soon to launch general bridging solution, BTP. We also have Inigo, a partnership manager at Spain's largest cryptocurrency exchange, Bit2Me. And rounding off the panel, we have Hugsuk, an engineer at A-Star, formerly known as Plasm, which is a parachain focused on connecting multiple L1 chains to the Polkadot network. Thanks so much for being here, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for that.
Okay, well, we're here to talk about interoperability. Baked into that topic, though, is the idea that one day we will live in a multi-chain world. Now, I'm going to turn it over to the panel here and ask you guys, do you see a future where there are many thriving blockchains, both public and private? Derek, do you want to start?
Sure. I would say, the short answer is yes, but I think there is some subtlety, to the answer where, you already see it, right? There's many blockchains now, pretty different than if you rewind back, a few years ago, where almost all, there was Bitcoin and almost all activity in terms of development was happening on Ethereum. These days, there's, you can even see from some of the folks in the panel here, there's different, different blockchains that have significant value, have significant user activity on them. And so I think there is this proliferation of chains happening, but at the same time, there's maybe a consolidation into the different tech stacks that are being used. So you even noticed when people are being introduced, there's several of the chains represented here are EVM compatible. So I think that's one trend that's definitely happening where there's this rich tool set around Ethereum and the EVM, and then there's a few other frameworks out there like Substrate, Cosmos SDK. There's a few others. So there's consolidation there, but many different chains.
Absolutely. And Renee, what about you from your perspective as an investor in the venture capital space, in the blockchain space? What is your thoughts on the future of being multi-chain and your overall assessment of the ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. Well, we definitely believe that we're going to be seeing a multi-chain world. And, we have Web3, right, which is all about decentralization. The more thriving blockchains, the more they can talk to one another, the more valuable the entire ecosystem becomes. And this is really what network effects is. And network effects comes out of Metcalfe's law. So when you talk about Metcalfe's law, you talk about, a very simple explanation is that for example, each time a user joins an app or on a network, the value of the app is increased to a power of 2. So if a network has 100 nodes, then power to 2 is 10,000, and then doubles to 200. 200 to the power of 2 is 40,000. So the value doesn't double, it quadruples. So when we talk about, from an investment perspective, we look for future value. So 100% that future value is going to quadruple the more that blockchains can interact with one another. So that's our perspective.
Absolutely. Scott, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what interoperability actually means from both a macro standpoint and non-technical and a technical standpoint.
Sure. Yeah. Even just on the general topic of many chains as well. I definitely, been in the space for almost 4 years now, and a lot of people have compared, the boom of blockchain to, the growth of the internet, and there's only one internet, or there's only a handful of IP providers as well, so there'll only be one or a handful of blockchains. But the longer I've been in the space, the more I've, had some conviction in my thoughts of blockchains more as countries, like digital nations, than actually, comparable to the to current internet infrastructure that we have. So, having said that, I absolutely think that like communicating between these nations and facilitating international trade, if you will, is going to be extremely important for the success of all these networks. And then in terms of like how to actually accomplish that from a technical standpoint, there's a wide array of solutions that we're seeing. Some that are more on like the secure and decentralized side, but maybe make sacrifices in terms of cost, and some that are more centralized and can be cheaper, potentially faster solutions. So there's a lot of different ways where we can see cross-chain communication happening. There's a lot of experimentation happening. I mean, the main thing that's happening right now is token transfer between networks. But like Icon solution, and I'm sure some of the others that we'll hear about on this call, is more of a generalized architecture for cross-chain communication. The first use case we'll build is just simple token transfer. But I think like where we'll really see interoperability thrive are in use cases that haven't even been built or developed yet, personally.
Absolutely. And it's an exciting opportunity because it seems the possibilities are limitless. Hungsuk, could you tell us a little bit more about what you think application for interoperability could be in the future for the real world, a real world use case of interoperability?
Well, one of the real use cases that I maybe found is that right now in Korea, general public is now interested in blockchain, and in the center of it, blockchain takes a place. And I know some of the projects in Korea called Second Seoul to sell like a digital land in a Seoul to like buy like and then live in a metaverse. I mean, it sounds crazy, but all the lands has been sold out after like 1 week launch. And one of my friends came to me like talking like, how do we connect to blockchain? So right now, they expect like a 3,000 TPS. I mean, over 3,000 PS to serve those like transactions in a blockchain. But that just obviously means that they need like a private solutions to accommodate those TPS. So for interoperability, I think it would mean to like handle those massive amount of transaction in a private environment, and then leave those validations in other public blockchains, or make it compatible so that those public blockchain infras can provide like an inverse panopticon social dynamic to validate those private transactions. But I'm pretty sure that's what layer 2 is doing, such as rollups.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, then, just as important as layer 2 solutions providing throughput and speed of transactions, do you agree that bridging solutions need to have an equal emphasis and focus on throughput and speed of transactions?
Yes, so if blocks cannot validate, like, just if you think about layer 2, it often requires like a complexity to validate the generated blocks from L2. So, I mean, L2 is basically really a delicate solutions, but it can't be like a silver bullet that can just fit into all those development teams. In this case, I think Bridge can actually do like maybe a more suitable solutions to the private blockchains where they need some more governances or more independency.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for a while we all thought that there was going to be a bunch of enterprise solutions or enterprise blockchains that are going to require a massive amount of interoperability and bridging transactions. That seemed to be the picture that the blockchain community had for several years. Do you think that is still the case currently? Do you think that there's been a boom in enterprise or private blockchain development, and is that need still there, Scott?
I think there is still a need in there because in Korea there was a blockchain called like a Clayton, but it really went well, and then companies were really thinking to move it to the Clayton, but actually it turns out that Clayton has like a security failure where those nodes and network could not operate for like 24 hours, just like Solana did. So basically, those companies actually need alternatives to support those services. I mean, even in Web2 infrastructure, not being able to serve a users for like 24 hours is a really serious problem. So yeah, we may need like a composable private blockchains to process these like massive amount of transactions for its like their special sectors. So
Scott, I'm gonna point that question to you for a follow up, and then Ganesh, I'd love to get your input on that as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I do think enterprise adoption was definitely slower than everyone anticipated. I've spoken about that a few times, but we've actually seen a major uptick. I mean, this could have to do with just the use case specifically, but my ID is a private blockchain network. Sorry, I'm in a WeWork, and it's pretty frustrating that they keep turning the lights off on me. But yeah, my ID is built on a private blockchain network. It's like a blockchain based identification solution. The actual identities themselves and KYC information are stored on a private network, but there is some component of the MyID infrastructure that uses public blockchain to save like hashed data to make it immutable, right? So that way there's some immutable record of like either where somebody was or when they got their like their vaccination or something. They're using it a lot for COVID-19 purposes in Korea. I know that. But yeah, I mean, overall the interest is still there, I would say. But in order to stay competitive in the public blockchain space, I think everyone understands that you need to move a little faster than and be prepared for what enterprises are going to do, but also have general public blockchain use cases as well.
Great. Ganesh, could you tell us a little bit about your work at Harmony and your perspective on interoperability?
Yeah, I just want to add my 2 cents to related to public and private blockchain thriving. I feel the public blockchains would thrive more than private. Mainly, it's kind of like it's really hard to spin up a network with so much decentralization, participation, and so on. And public blockchains are getting more and more secure, decentralized, having a lot of users. And enterprises, there has been a resistance to using public blockchain is mainly the private information where enterprise doesn't want to share. But the advancement in latest zero knowledge technologies are going to encourage more and more enterprise participation into the public blockchain itself compared to spinning up their own blockchain and kind of dealing with how to secure the network and so on. In terms of interoperability, Harmony has been our goal for starting from this year and next couple of years has been connecting to all the other blockchains. And at the end of the day, what we want to achieve is provide maximum benefits to the users. So users are not going to stay in one ecosystem. They are going to move around and try out different ecosystem. What they mainly care is like API benefits to their profit, right? As a infrastructure providers, our layer 1 blockchains or even layer 2 blockchains, our concentration would be to make it really cost and time effective for the users at the same time without sacrificing the security. And also the user experience has been coming up more and more where the users are finding it difficult to use these interoperability solutions. So we are putting a lot of effort into how do we improve the user experience, reduce the cost, and make it really fast to for users and application to utilize multiple blockchains. So that's has been our goal and concentration.
Great, thank you. So what are the strategic and technical challenges of building a bridging solution? Maybe we can go through each one of your respective projects and kind of get your own personal philosophy about how you are architecturing these solutions, because I know we have a bunch of different approaches today. Ganesh, you can start.
Yeah, in terms of technical challenges, keeping the interoperability solution trustless and decentralized is the most important aspect, because there are different kinds of bridges you can build, right? The more decentralized and trustless, meaning that when we say trustless, basically means you only need to trust the 2 blockchains that are interoperating. There won't be any intermediate set of validators or intermediate parties that are going to facilitate your interoperability or cross-chain transactions. So to achieve really trustless technology and decentralized, it becomes expensive, right? Like the one way is to do is let the two blockchains verify each other in the form of cross-chain light clients. But these are tend to be very expensive. But there have been some research, latest advancement in terms of zero knowledge. All the latest technologies are going to reduce the cost and promote more and more trustless, decentralized technology development in terms of interoperability.
Great, thank
And
you.
strategically, I think at the end of the day, which blockchains to connect to or interoperate with is going to be less and less important, because in the multi-chain world, all these blockchains are going to emerge and there will be need to connect to all the blockchains. The important aspect would be how do we effectively connect to each of these blockchains with the end goal of benefiting users.
Absolutely. So your perspective is that we won't really see a winner take all in terms of public blockchains necessarily. You know, say Ethereum becomes the de facto smart blockchain platform of the world. We're much more likely to see a multi-chain world where there are a bunch of different blockchains serving various niches in the economy or on the planet or in human society. Thank you.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Derek, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think I have to give some context. We have a network that we launched about just shy of 4 months ago called Moon River, and we've been able to observe a lot of different bridging technologies in play, like on this network. So there are many different approaches at this point. Particularly ones that are targeted at EVM compatible chains. You have approaches where there's kind of this lock and mint mechanism. You have this like light client approach that Ganesh was talking about. You have approaches where you're kind of actually doing these like cross-chain swaps, like at least for token transfer scenarios. There's quite, I would say this area, there's quite a bit of innovation. There's, I think even on Moon River, there's probably about, 8 or 9 different bridging teams at this point. I would say that for us, there are some different categories, and in general, I think Ganesh was kind of hinting at this. When you have these bridges that are a separate protocol that are layering on top and connecting to blockchains, you do get some additional assumptions being made. Some additional trust assumptions, some additional security assumptions being made. And I think that there's a spectrum there, right? Going from, even an exchange would be like the most centralized version of a bridge. People use that as a bridge basically, right? They'll withdraw on one chain and kind of deposit on another chain, going to these more trustless ones, which are much more difficult to make. But I think it is this layering effect that is not that well appreciated by people. There's a lot of people that just ape across these chains, but they're not really asking questions about, well, what are the additional security assumptions that I'm making? And so that's, I would say, I suspect that there's going to be some people are going to get educated about that, right? There's going to be some failures or something, because not all these things are created equal. The thing that attracted us into the Polkadot ecosystem in the first place was their approach to this problem. Because I think as soon as we kind of recognized that this networking or this ability to connect between chains was going to be a critical capability in a multi-chain world. And so Polkadot has a very specific point of view on how to do this. So they do use this kind of light client approach, but it's built into the base protocol itself. And so there is this kind of that is like a big strength of Polkadot, where if you are a Polkadot parachain, you're built using Substrate and one of these parachains on Polkadot, then you can communicate with other chains without making additional security assumptions. And so that was a big draw for us as to why we went are spending our time in building in Polkadot. And we think that that's going to provide a solid kind of infrastructure for doing these kinds of cross-chain interactions. But of course, on the other side, not every chain is a Polkadot parachain. So all these other techniques are needed too, if you want to be able to communicate across the variety of all the different kinds of chains that existed out there.
And a follow-up to that, because you and Hunsuk are both representatives of projects that are Polkadot parachains. Could you just dive a little bit deeper into what the differences of your objectives and goals and approaches are between Moonbeam and A-Star?
Sure. I mean, I think there's probably there might be more similarities than there are differences, but I think on the Moonbeam side, like, we're both projects, in fact, are targeting developers and are smart contract oriented like platforms. I would say we're focused really on our main focus, initial focus has been on providing support for the Ethereum technology stack. So that's the EVM and use of the Ethereum tools. But yeah, I'll pass it to Young-Suk. He can talk about Astar.
So Astar actually started to be like a smart contract platform for the Polkadot, since Relay Chain does not support like a smart contract chain. But right now, our current focus is that we believe that EVM is also like, it represents the present our smart contract developer ecosystem. But we think actually there's more potential in WebAssembly, in that most of the software developers out there are not really educated about those EVM. I mean, in infrastructure, if you think about current ecosystem, we can say that it is pretty much developed. But in a general awareness, still has a long way to go. And Astar tries to innovate with Polkadot to bring those smart contract infrastructure for the general public developer ecosystem, so that people can actually bring this Web3 environment. Other than that, we try to provide like a sustainable building ecosystem using a dApp staking, where if developers make their dApps and they try to make their Web3 business, they need to have like a source of income to get support from being decentralized. Astar tries to provide those infrastructure through network inflation using a dApp staking, where people vote for the dApps that they think that they will maintain this Web3 ecosystem. And that's what we're trying to build, pretty much the Web3 infrastructure for the next internet.
Great, thank you. And Scott, could you comment on bridging solutions being generalized versus chain specific? What are the advantages and disadvantages for this?
Generalized versus chain specific, I guess. Are you referring to like the Polkadot? Go ahead.
Yeah, or bridging solutions that are blockchain agnostic, like BTP, versus a more specific chain bridging solution.
I guess I view kind of, I'd be happy to hear Derek's perspective, or Derek and Young-Suk's perspective on this, but I almost view like the Polkadot ecosystem and the relay chain model as almost like a different architecture of how to build apps. It's like, as opposed to having a layer one blockchain where you build apps with smart contracts, you essentially have applications built on through like application specific blockchains. Like, Moonbeam has some sort of specific goal. I imagine Astar has some sort of specific goal. They're kind of application specific networks, although you can also build just a generalized layer one on top of that. But yeah, like Derek pointed out, I mean, the Polkadot relay chain is essentially like one version of interoperability that supports its own ecosystem, which is very similar to IBC as well. Although I'm sure both of them could be generalized if they wanted to, but I think this is like a kind of good first step. Icon is going with, it was touched on by both Derek and Ganesh about how, the different types of solutions of like an on-chain light client versus some sort of centralized validator layer that adds another layer of trust. Icon's BTP is that on-chain light client. It does have more expense associated with it, which we are doing research in ourselves as well to try and limit how often we need to update the chains. A huge part of the expense is continuously keeping the on-chain light clients up to date, but it does really remove that extra trust layer, which I do feel is one of the most important aspects of a bridge. And I think Derek said it well, is that, we're going to have like everyone's using these bridges and aping into them, and there's going to be a lesson learned at some point, right? I mean, most of these are glorified, unregulated custodians, right? They're just like trusts. It's like, I trust this guy and these 5 signatures with like, however many billions in total value locked, until all of a sudden it makes more sense to just shut down the bridge and keep the money and disappear. So like, I do think that removing that trust factor is the most important part. And one of the more difficult aspects of building a bridge solution, in my view right now, that I'm trying to think through, is how to estimate the fees for relayers, right? Like, even if you have an on-chain light client, there still needs to be someone that's passing these transactions between networks, and they're still going to incur a fee. So being able to like properly estimate that fee and compensate them in a sustainable way that scales, right? Like they get more compensation the more this bridge is getting used. That's something that I'm actively thinking about right now.
Thank you very much. Renee, what is the venture capital perspective on all this? What are the questions that you guys are thinking about in terms of bridging and interoperability? Is trustlessness and decentralization a big factor for you? Is it timing? Do you think that it's too early to invest significant money into these solutions? What's your assessment overall?
Well, first of all, trustless and interoperability are huge to us and what we're looking at. I think that what we're looking for, and we see that they're now just being built, are the solutions to trustlessly, and that's very important, enable direct transactions across all chains. So allowing a transaction to flow freely between chains really provides the opportunity for users to consolidate fragmented pockets of liquidity, but then also making full use of the applications on the separate chains. So that's what we think is really going to push us to the next level. Now, we're not saying that that's easy. And certainly the engineers on the platform tonight know that we have to build the infrastructure to get there. And we feel that right now those solutions are just being built, and but that's really going to push us into the next wave of Web 3.0, being trustless, interoperable, and being able to unlock a lot of the value that we see right now is consolidated on these individual walled gardens, so to speak.
Great, thank you. Inigo, I haven't forgot about you. Could you please offer your perspective on interoperability and how it fits into the centralized exchange ecosystem, or into Bit2Me specifically?
Yeah, of course. Well, personally, I see in the next decades of adoption, the crypto ecosystem taking two steps. The first one being private blockchains interconnecting with public blockchains and coming into sort of a hybrid era. And the second one would be mass adoption of fully public blockchains. Although this is hard to picture for anyone, right? I think it's the next generations that will come that will realize that the difference between these blockchains is essentially the way they build trust, and that the true value of blockchain resides in actual decentralization. So right now, not just Bit2Me, but regarding private blockchains, they actually take some innovations from the public blockchains, such as Ethereum and Bitcoin, and we've seen these leveraged in projects doing decentralized peer-to-peer settlements and smart contracts with software such as Hyperledger or Corda. Personally, in Bit2Me, so right now we are looking forward to being more interoperable with DeFi, full DeFi, because we are a centralized exchange. But we do want to make our community feel involved and participate with us in both governance, decision making, and everything that comes in the future with our platform.
Fantastic, thank you. What about Bitcoin? Where does Bitcoin fit into the interoperability question? Because it's the legacy crypto project, legacy blockchain. I believe, Ganesh, you guys at Harmony are building something with Bitcoin in mind. Could you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, definitely. Bitcoin has largest user base, right? Like there's only less than like 1% of the Bitcoin is able to actively participate in the DeFi and benefit, right? So our goal is to, in a trustless manner, try to onboard the Bitcoin users into this DeFi ecosystem. Starting with the Harmony being a EVM chain, the model can be replicated across all different EVM chains so that we can onboard more and more Bitcoin users that are currently deprived of this DeFi and other upcoming NFT Metaverse, Plato, and all these should be reachable to every cryptocurrency kind of users, right? The challenge with the bridging to Bitcoin is there is a smart contract feature coming up, but traditionally lack of smart contracts makes the bridging solution even harder, right? The approach we took is basically exclaim technology, where there will be a decentralized set of walls that will facilitate the transfer of native Bitcoin to an EVM chain like Harmony, so that Bitcoins can be wrapped and utilized in the DeFi ecosystem that Harmony provides. But this whole technology must be trustless and decentralized, because that's the main motto or goal of Bitcoin, right? So any Bitcoin user will only be comfortable using the DeFi or wrapping their Bitcoin into a other ecosystem if it's highly secured, trustless, and decentralized. So keeping that in mind, we try to build our bridging solution to Bitcoin, which is upcoming.
That's an excellent point, and I think very well made. You know, token transfers seems to be just the beginning for this.
Yeah.
Where I get personally very excited about where the future of a multi-chain world could be is the creation of private blockchain, private enterprise blockchains interacting with other private enterprise blockchains to do good in the world from a societal and economic perspective. Would anyone like to jump in and kind of think or philosophize about what use cases could be created from this, from insurance to medical to NFTs, gaming, metaverses? What's some zany idea? I mean, I know you guys are so focused on building solutions in the now, but is there anything that gets you really excited about what could be developed in the future and is forward thinking for people interested in blockchain?
Sure, I'll jump in on that.
Right on,
personally, yeah, I mean, what I'm really excited about is going to sound like really boring and generic, is just like, like really efficient cross-chain contract calls, where a smart contract on one network is calling directly to a smart contract on another network through some sort of trustless relay system. On-chain light clients is obviously the direction we're going. Part of the real difficulty there, like I was saying earlier, is the estimating transaction fees and compensating relays accordingly. If you allow arbitrary contract calls, someone could call something that's like highly complex, like a multi-routed trade from like multiple different networks, that's going to cost the relay like hundreds of dollars in gas fees across multiple different networks. So being able to estimate that is something that I'm really interested in, and developing that technology that's really more of a back-end software for the relay network. But yeah, I mean, the specific use case of that to me that I'm really excited about is, I'm a finance guy at heart. I was in banking for years before coming into the blockchain space, and I definitely am excited to think about automated yield generating opportunities where the core logic will rest on one network that has low latency cross-chain contract calls, and then it can ping just cross network and say, what's the yield here, what's the yield there, what's the yield here, and then optimize where it sends user deposits. So there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built to make that happen, but a clear vision of having that as like a final goal makes a lot of sense to me.
Most definitely. Renee, I'm going to turn the same question to you.
Yeah, I'll talk about a completely different industry. We are industry agnostic, and one of the pain points that we're looking at is healthcare. And right now, sharing of data. So we look at blockchains, both private and public, being able to talk to one another and being able to share data, healthcare related, like medical records. So for example, today we have pretty big rent seekers in the medical records industry that specifically have built their platforms not to share information. And that's how they make their money. So we would like to see that completely turned upside down with the new technologies that are coming online, such that your personal, well, first of all, you own your own personal information, and you're able to share it cross-chain as you wish. So those are the things that, as far as making society better and trying to improve what we have today, we think that's an industry that's ripe for disruption.
As a student en route to being a doctor, I completely agree with you, and that's very exciting to me too personally. So thank you for that. Hung Suk, could I get your same thought? Let's go around table and get some ideas flowing.
Sorry, I just couldn't hear the question. What was it?
What excites you in terms of potential interoperability use cases in the future? They can be, 10 years out, but when you look and see a world of a multi-chain world, what use case is most exciting to you?
So I think the most exciting case will be, I guess, pretty much bridging through pretty much any blockchains out there, because even though we are pretty much building a decentralized finance for mass adoption, I believe that there should be a kind of like a bridge between those fiat assets and then those blockchain assets to be compatible altogether. So it will be pretty much exciting to see those bridges can bring those solutions to bring our current working assets to be plugged into a blockchain ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. Derek?
Sure. I mean, I always have this little bit of an engineering point of view on things, so I will kind of give you that. But I can give you some practical examples. So I agree with the idea that asset transfers are the simplest first manifestation of what cross-chain use cases look like. But as we move into a world where there's remote kind of calls, that does open up a lot of different possibilities. And I would say we're at the beginning of kind of getting of this shift that's going to happen from largely standalone blockchains, where almost all dApps that have been created to date have been largely created with a monochain, like a single chain deployment in mind, to rethinking like what they look like in a multi-chain environment. And even now, like some of the even teams that are aggressively pursuing multi-chain plans, it's pretty simplistic, right? I mean, they're kind of just like taking their existing thing that was deployed on one chain, and then they like have copies like on many chains. Basically, that's like the state of the art right now, I guess I'd say. But that's not really taking advantage of this idea of some other folks were mentioning that maybe it makes sense to host certain components on one chain, especially if it's like optimized for certain use cases, and leverage other chains for what they're good at. So I do think that's the key unlock is. To date, when you're not networked, you kind of have to try to be kind of okay at everything, but you end up being kind of not good at like many things. Once you have this networking capability, then you can really specialize on certain things and be really good at certain things, because that if I need other things, I can go to someone else to get it, right? Versus having to do it myself. And so, I mean, I'll give you a practical example that's, perhaps a little bit simplistic, but it's kind of going in this direction. I mean, we're working right now with a project team at Lido. Lido makes a liquid staking derivative product. Like they're probably the largest protocol doing this right now on Ethereum. And so they want to make one for the Polkadot ecosystems. They want to make a liquid staked dot product. And so what they're doing though is they're going to build a dApp on Moonbeam. So this is our Ethereum environment. So they have like an Ethereum style dApp. But then we've created these kind of special precompiles. So these remote calls that they can make, so that they can perform staking operations from their dApp on the Relay chain, which is a specialized chain that has a lot of advanced staking functionality on it. So then in this case it's pretty simple, but like you already here have like two different chains that are specialized in different things, but you have like one application that's spanning like across both of them, and you get this like whole is greater than the sum of its parts effect when you're using these multiple specialized systems. So I think that's we're in early days of this, but that's I kind of use this mental model of like computing, right? With computing, you have all these very specialized kinds of computers, and when you combine them together, you get these like very rich scenarios or possibilities. So that's kind of how I think about things.
Absolutely. We are in early days, but there's always the potential for a large company such as Facebook rebranding to Meta to accelerate these types of technologies just through need. I remember Mark Zuckerberg said that during the rebrand that interoperability was going to be one of the key challenges to the success of a metaverse or into their company in the near future. What do you think the solution that team, just speculation, obviously we can't know what's going inside of their of their company, but do you think that they are probably going to build their own solutions to fix this problem, or are they going to do outreach to the blockchain communities in order to accomplish this? What challenges come with trying to build enterprise interoperability solutions and create this Web3 when you have both an ecosystem that is blockchain decentralized focused, the ones that we are all a part of, but then also the corporate enterprise market that are trying to capitalize on these trends themselves? Anyone can jump in on here if you'd like to answer.
I can. I don't want to jump in on anyone else. So
please, Derek.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I do well. I mean, standards is one thing. I mean, these cross-chain standards are pretty lacking right now, and it's because all these chains have historically been so tribal that working together is not something that happens naturally. But there are certain islands. So I mentioned before this EVM compatibility. I think that's one thing that a whole bunch of chains have agreed on, and you can see already there's this big network effect and this big. And that's where a lot of the traction is happening now because of that standardization. So, but there's more standardization needed, I think, to drive this. When it comes to your specific question about Meta, I'm not I just think that it's kind of that innovator's dilemma where for a company, an organization like that to embrace these Web3 principles, I just don't think is possible. So they'll be window dressing, I think. I mean, to try to make it seem like that, but it's just they have such a complete control over their environment now. If you really want to buy into these Web3 principles, you have to do the opposite of what you do if you're a company. You have to give it all away. I just don't see how shareholders of of Meta are gonna be okay with giving it all away. It's just so I think it's going to be a competitor or some set of standards that come up to challenge them. That's kind of my vision.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely completely agree with Derek there. It's a company like Facebook, giving up control over Meta, giving up core control over their their product, their app. I mean, I think you kind of see they're trying to build all the pieces right now between the data collection, social network, and then they have the Oculus app and a number of different. I'm sure they're gonna try and just own the entire stack. But as long as they expose some open APIs for us Web3 innovators to leverage, that's not to say that we can't still benefit from the success of Meta and vice versa.
It does seem antithetical to the principles of decentralization and that blockchain has been built on. So I wasn't advocating for them, but I'm just saying it's a reality, right? We have these big companies coming on board building these things, and from the perspective of interoperability solutions, I'm just wondering your thoughts on how it will affect the work that you guys are all doing.
Yeah, I think being generalizable and flexible with excellent API documentation is extremely important in terms of adoption of your technology. So that was definitely amazing.
Yeah.
To add a comment, actually, whether they're private or public, I think those blockchain has to satisfy this inverse panopticon social dynamic, where users or any community members could actually see the clear logics working on the blockchain. Without any centralized control. So one of the problems about this kind of a liquid staking is that there's a one centralized party to have a stake funds, but people are pretty much not able to track how those staking funds are spent in the blockchain. So for example, if you look at what Anchor, they also use Lido, but if they have a BE, they don't know how these ETH are kind of staking the Cosmos SDK. Only Lido knows how to do that. But I think if Meta approaches the same way, that, hey, we do a Web3 approach, but we're not going to show what we're doing, or just kind of lack of information to show to the general public that they can surveil the network and then kind of have a open governance to change the parameters if they can. I think that actually will perish as people finds out that some protocols every protocols are decentralized, but like some protocols are more decentralized than the others, just like Animal Farm. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think Meta could actually take the approach. I don't know if you guys heard of a product that EY actually rolled out a few years back called Nightfall, but they utilize zero knowledge proof consensus mechanism to actually build on top of Ethereum transactions that could be completely private. That could be an approach for Meta, maybe.
Yeah, agree. Like it's a lot of responsibility on interoperability solution builders to facilitate how the future DApps are going to benefit from these multiple blockchains, multi-chain world, right? Not just taking Meta as an example, but currently all the dApps are kind of forced to go single chain or just duplicate over multiple chains, mainly because the interoperability is not very efficient. So in the future, solve this problem of making it really cheap, fast, and secure. Then all these dApps also go out of the box and think how they can deploy parts of their application logic across multiple chains in a way that it doesn't even seem like they're going from one blockchain to another blockchain to do certain functionality. So the apps would be kind of abstracting away the blockchain boundaries. So that's where I would see in the future private organizations trying to benefit from this. And also with respect to private informations, technologies like zero knowledge proofs are going to be very applied to make them kind of give the confidence to utilize the public blockchain more and more than doing everything in private.
Yeah, definitely.
Great point.
Can
Of course.
I would just wonder if I could add to that conversation and just give all of the panelists just some food for thought. So when we talk about disruptive innovation, which came out of the work of Clay Christensen out of Harvard Business School professor, there's a very classic theory that the incumbent, which we can call Meta now, continues innovating on a sustaining level because they control so much. They have so much market power. So Meta, it has billions of users, and so they can believe that they can continue on their path, and they don't need to pay attention to these early adopters, this new technology down below, because right now it's just a very niche group. Well, disruptive innovation is when all of a sudden that very niche group continues to grow and grows to the point where it intersects with the incumbent and then overtakes the incumbent. That's classical disruptive innovation. So what we have to think about, and I don't know the answer to this, is whether Meta realizes that. If they do realize that, then they are going to make changes in their business model because they have to. Otherwise, they're going to be overtaken by these new disruptive innovators that we're all, talking about. So, so that's an interesting. And the other thing that I have to say is that, the Wall Street financial analysts are looking at this. There was a talk on Monday where I was actually taken aback because there was a Goldman Sachs analyst talking about interoperability and being the next opportunity, for infrastructure. And I thought to myself, whoa, Wall Street's thinking about this already? They have analysts talking about this? And they're talking about the value that, $100 million investment today in building the next infrastructure. And we're talking about three companies, Meta, Roblox, and Snapchat, that the output from that could be $2 to $12 trillion in the next 3 to 10 year time horizon. So I think that these incumbents are very much looking at the output of value, but they're also trying to figure out how we're going to get there. And as I said, I don't know whether Meta is going to be that forward thinking into completely changing their model in order to be more interoperable. So we'll see.
It's an excellent point. I think that blockchain infrastructure investment in topics tend to go in waves, right, of what's in vogue. And I'd say right now, maybe scaling, sharding, DK rollups, these tend to be the achieving economy of scale in order to bring layer 1 or layer 2 blockchains to a mass adoption into the economy is what's people are really focused on. But interoperability, in my opinion, is next up. So it's really interesting to hear that people like Goldman Sachs are just having these conversations. But what about for the retail investors, the people that allow this entire industry to be possible, that, so many of them invest in your respective projects? What would you say, why should investors care about bridging? And do you believe that bridging will drive tokenomic value for your respective stakeholders? Scott?
Yeah, all right, yeah. I kind of assumed that was pointed to sure. But yeah, I mean, I do think that first of all, for just any general user of in the blockchain ecosystem, being able to use an app on a low latency cross-chain hub, like what Icon is striving to be, allows you to get access to a lot of different types of use cases, like the cross-chain yield aggregator. So like those are the types of things, that's just one area of where it benefits, your average user. I don't know if that's necessarily classified as a retail investor, but, I'm thinking about like existing DeFi users and being able to take advantage of more opportunities in an easier way. I saw like a demo the other day just of like how many clicks it takes to go from like, one chain to another and then end up depositing your assets in their money market, right? Like there's like so many clicks, so many gas fees, like it's just such a manual process right now. So I think user experience is going to be an essential piece of the future of interoperability. Like I hate to sound cliche, but I say it all the time. We are still like so early. Everyone is just kind of experimenting and trying these like little things like, Derek was mentioning it also, just, token transfer between networks, but it's like a super manual process. So, abstracting away the entire process of transferring between networks has got to be a priority. And then in terms of like accruing value to like an interoperability solution, I mean, Icon does have its own token. Not all of them do, but we have built in some, token economics where the fees charged by the relay network will be auctioned off to, token holder, ICX token holders. So I do think there's like tangible benefit to, those in the Icon ecosystem, where the more that the BTP solution scales, the more, it impacts the Icon ecosystem.
Anybody
Definitely.
else like to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's for the retail investors, right? I think bridging and like creating this actual connected and interoperable crypto space will actually not only just generate more utility for tokens, but actually create longer lasting user relationships with the actual protocols, because they won't have to do these manual processes or do any cross bridging from one blockchain to another. So they will be able to actually retain the token they like and use it anywhere they want, which I think is pretty relevant as well. Yeah.
Well, we're coming up on 5 minutes left, so I think I would like to just give you all last remarks, to say anything that comes to your mind about the space, what our discussion has been, what you'd like to spread awareness about for your own projects, or just general feelings about the ecosystem. Who would like to go first?
I'll take that. Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about what our opinions are on the future of interoperability and how things are going to go. And, I think like the key point and key thing that I try to keep in mind is that I'm just not going to be able to predict the future. I'm not going to necessarily know what's going to be big next. And that's why like the most important thing for our interoperability solution is flexibility, how general it is, being able to be applied to multiple different types of use cases. We don't need to guess the use case. We just need to understand that interoperability is going to be a piece of the future. And I think that is a safe assumption.
Well, for me, interoperability is surely an exciting topic, and and Astar tries to be part of that by venturing out this WebAssembly to have a direct access on the runtime across Polkadot ecosystem. So yeah, EVM has broad compatibility across these like blockchain ecosystems, but for like fully decentralized and clear, trustless ways of interoperability, I think to adapt that, I think WebAssembly smart contracts are the answers to their Polkadot XCMP ecosystem. I mean, it's definitely achievable in the Moonbeam with the EVM precompiles, but it just goes through an extra steps. So yeah, it might. We are also venturing out those compatibilities though, but yeah, but WebAssembly is truly interesting, and we're trying to dig into that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Ganesh?
Yeah. Yeah, when we build this sophisticated technology, one key thing we have to keep in mind is at the end of the day, it always should be user first. So at Harmony, the technology itself is still emerging. There will be multiple solutions. Some of them succeed, some of them fail, but it's still too early to say that we will be able to converge onto something. But what to keep in mind is that we are converging to benefit the users at the end of the day.
That's great. Derek?
Yeah, a couple points. I mean, I think one point I'd make is around, I think that as blockchains become more interoperable, I mentioned it before that historically there's just been such kind of heavy tribalism based on whatever bags you had and all of this. But I do think there is an opportunity for these positive sum kind of outcomes, right? Where it really isn't that it's a zero sum and that's one person's gain is another person's loss. That you can kind of create more value through like these kinds of interactions that are possible. So I think that's there's an opportunity there to really grow like the whole ecosystem. So that's one thing that I think is quite positive when I think about it. I would also comment a little bit on what Scott was saying about UX, and that is something that I think about quite a bit too, especially coming from, I have more of a Web 2 background coming into Web 3, and it is something that is not like, there's not as much attention paid, in Web 3 to UX in general. And I liken it to right now, like the end user has to be aware of like all these backend systems they're interacting with. So it's kind of like if you were using a mobile app and you're being prompted for every database that stuff was being written into. And that's just I just don't think that that's set up for like mass adoption that people are kind of predicting. So I see interoperability as a way to, some of Scott's comments I would definitely agree with that. You need to hide some of this like complexity. You need to kind of like abstract like the user away from it. I mean, they still probably want some awareness of what's happening, but you can't have it be that they're going to be aware of all the what might be 6, 7, 10 dozen systems that they're going to be interacting with in the future. That's just like not going to create a user experience that's workable. So that's where I think that's going to be a key outcome of a lot of these interoperability solutions would be to have these kind of complex like outcomes possible, but like shield the user and create like simplified user experiences that still aren't centralized. Like I think that's probably the thing I'm most interested in as an unlock towards getting large numbers of more users like onto Web3 based systems.
Excellent, thank you. Inigo?
Yeah, sure. So at Bit2Me, we all believe that the first step for mass adoption and interoperability or anything in this sense is education, right? So we're trying to actually really boost our academy up because we think it's going to be the on-ramp to generating more user adoption as well as better user-friendly platforms as more people get in, not just retail investors, but also technical people, right? That can help us develop this new future in the crypto ecosystem.
Perfect. And Renee?
I'll come back to the conversation regarding the retail investor, the consumer, and what we see bridging does is to really, it opens up the total addressable market. And I'll use the gaming analogy. So if you have a skin, let's say on Call of Duty, right? The market value on Call of Duty right now is about $9.7 billion. But think about if your skin can be used on any gaming platform, right? Think about cross platforms. And the total gaming industry today is worth about 200 billion. So that opens up the value of what you own as a consumer or retail investor. It opens up economic opportunity, and we feel that's super exciting as far as what we're going to see in the future. And those are the things that we look at as far as whether it's increasing value for the investor or increasing value for the retail or consumer.
That's great. Well, that concludes our panel. Thank you so much to everyone who is here. I can't appreciate it enough. And it's just been a great talk, and I hope we get to do another one soon.
Thanks,
been a
Max.
pleasure.
Thank you to all who watch and support.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.